What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Cain Course 2020 AP Edition. That's right, I'm here to help you prep for the AP test, and that can be a big undertaking. From DBQs to LEQs to SAQs, boy, that's a lot of Qs. There's a lot to be conscious of when it comes to the AP test, and I'm starting with this video going to break it down for you section by section. And one of the first things we're going to take a look at is the LEQ, the long essay question. That's right, each LEQ essay is based on a certain historical skill. So in this case, the skill of comparison. Taking two different things in history, whether it's a person or a civilization or a religion or a development, and comparing and contrasting them. Finding both the similarities and the differences between them, and making a cohesive historic argument that is rooted in evidence that defends those points. Now, before we start talking about how to actually write a comparison essay, let's talk about what the LEQ is actually looking for and what the rubric would grade you on. There are 6 possible points in an AP World History LEQ. The first point is your thesis, your overall claim or argument that's stated early on in the essay. You get 1 point based on whether or not that thesis is historically defensible, clear, and just overall a good setup for your essay. That's 1 point. Then you get up to 1 point for contextualization. That's something that you either have or you don't, kind of like the thesis. And we'll talk about contextualization more in a little bit, but basically that's the background information. What else is going on in the time that you're writing it? But truly, the LEQ comes down to the last 4 points. The first of those 2 points is given based on evidence. You get 1 point if you provide specific, relevant historical examples that are connected to the prompt. And then you get a 2nd point if you actually use those in order to actually defend your essay and defend your argument. That's a subtle difference. We'll unpack that in a little bit. And then finally, you can get up to 2 points for your analysis and reasoning skills. The first point is awarded if you truly use the skill that the essay is looking for. So in this case, comparison. And the 2nd point is really up to the person who scores it. It's sort of, does your essay meet a certain level of complexity? And how you do that is kind of up to interpretation. But in this case, I'm going to show you how to get it based on using the full skill of comparison, meaning you're not only comparing, but also contrasting. Now that might seem like a lot right now. However, I'm going to break it down section by section using an actual prompt from AP in order for you to have a better understanding of how to practice this and prepare on your own. So let's start at the beginning. Before you even think about writing an LEQ essay, you need to dissect the prompt. And what I mean by that is to break down the prompt and figure out what exactly is the prompt asking me to do. So here's an example of a prompt right here. Analyze to what extent 2 of the following religions differed in practice from their beginnings to 1450. Christianity, Islam, and Buddhism. So based on what the prompt is asking us, which you can find for your reference right here, the question wants us to compare and contrast 2 of these religions. So to start, I'm going to pick 2 that I think go together very well while still have a lot of differences. I'm going to go with Christianity and Islam. Now, it's also important to take note of what time period the prompt is asking us. In this case, it's from the beginning of the religions all the way up until 1450. So that would fit into Unit 1 within AP World History. So within that time frame, we want to analyze and find evidence that says either these 2 are the same or they are different. Comparison skill is pretty simple. That's pretty much all they want, is to identify similarities and differences. Now, obviously, we want to do that in an academic, historically rich way, but at least we have a clear understanding of where we're going from. With that in mind, we can start attacking the rubric and crafting our essay. So with the prompt in mind, now we can start building our argument. And every good argument starts with a thesis. Without a thesis statement, you have no argument. You have nothing to stand on. This is what you're going to use to defend yourself. So unlike in English classes and other classes, your thesis is not just a claim. It is also an introduction of evidence. With those 2 things in mind, I can start to formulate my thesis statement. Now remember, I'm looking at Christianity and Islam, 2 religions that are in fact very similar, but also have a lot of differences. Because of compare and contrast, and the fact that I want to get the complexity point, more on that later, I'm going to use both a comparison and a contrast, but I need to argue one over the other. This comes from a very distinct formula that you can use to write a good AP essay. It involves a phrase known as counterpoint. So anytime you introduce a counterpoint and you successfully prove the other way or you fight against it, you are writing a complex essay. So in this case, I'm looking at both comparison and a contrast, both similarity and difference. That formula goes like this: although X, Y, because A, B, and C. So although Christianity and Islam may be similar, they have multiple differences, such as blank, blank, and blank. And that's what I'm going to put into my thesis here. Now again, I'm going to assert that while Christianity and Islam have their similarities, there are a few distinct differences. So a thesis would then look like this. Although the origins of both Christianity and Islam can be traced back to the Bible and follow monotheistic traditions, the two religions are distinctly different because of their means of diffusion and views of salvation. What I have just set up is a very clear thesis statement that not only includes evidence, it is divided into 3 different sections. Therefore, I have 3 body paragraphs. See, my first body paragraph is going to talk about how Christianity and Islam are similar in their origins, specifically the Bible. My second 2 paragraphs are going to talk about how these 2 religions spread, and then followed by how they actually view salvation. Those are 3 very clear pieces of evidence that I've already introduced into my essay. And now that I have that in the thesis, I can go forth in a very historic manner. Now that leads us to the second part of the rubric, where we can get 1 point again for contextualization. Now this comes second in the rubric, but I actually think this should go before your thesis because it just makes more sense. Contextualization is kind of the story of world history. It's everything that's going on in the background before or after this time. It's kind of like in Star Wars at the beginning when there's that opening scroll that comes up on the screen that tells you what happened in between movies. That's exactly what contextualization is. You're putting the reader into that time frame by giving them an overarching theme of what's actually going on in world history. Now, this doesn't have to be exhaustive. We're talking about 1 to 2 fact-rich sentences that really tell what's going on in the greater scheme of history. Now, we don't want to talk about everything that happened. We're looking in a 1 to 200 year range within this time period. So for this prompt right now, 1 to 200 years before or after the start of Christianity and Islam. So really the start of the modern era. So what are the broader events going on? What are the new developments? Who are the empires that are in control? What are some new developments or inventions that have changed the world? What are the bigger forces that are at work? All of these are things we should be thinking about as we move forward to give a context for both Christianity and Islam. Now, there are tons of important events that you could choose from here, and it's really up to you. This is where you can add some creativity to your essay. But some examples might include things like the fall of Rome, or the formation of the Roman Catholic Church and the coronation of Charlemagne. All of those events tell us what's going on with the power of the Christian church in Europe. You can talk about the rise of Muhammad and how the Islamic empires and Dar al-Islam have begun to grow ever since the Islamic religion was founded. You can also talk about the fact that behind all of this, trade routes like the Silk Road and the Indian Ocean have brought the world further together and have provided a wonderful context, again, there's that word, for the diffusion and spread of religions as well as syncretism overall. You can choose any of those events. It's totally up to you. But again, putting those together in a content-rich way, a factual way, will set up your essay. So a good context for this LEQ could be something like this. Before the period 1200 to 1450, both Christianity and Islam experienced periods of intensification. In Islam, the world of Dar al-Islam continued to grow under the reign of the caliphs and through use of trade routes like the Silk Road and Indian Ocean routes. Christianity, however, became more popular in Europe as the Catholic Church under the reign of the Pope continued to maintain political power that was unprecedented. There I have included a very clear context for what I'm going to discuss, and now I can dive into those religions specifically and actually compare and contrast them. So now that we have our thesis and our context, we can start actually writing our essay. Now, I'm not actually going to write a whole essay for you. I don't think anyone wants to watch me write an essay. However, I'm going to walk you through how I would write this one by giving you a few key pieces of information. Now again, the next part of the rubric, the next 2 points are based on your use of evidence. This is super important because it is a history class and we need evidence to prove our points. The best way to do this is to have 3 clear points, which we already do in our thesis, that can be backed by evidence. Let's review. Here are our 3 pieces of evidence. Our first piece of evidence is our similarity, that both Christianity and Islam have similar roots going back to the Bible. That's a very clear similarity. Both of them utilize the Bible. Now, obviously, it's more important in Christianity, and it's actually believed in comparison to Islam. That's a whole nother discussion. But the origins go back to the Bible, and not just the Bible, but origins can be traced through the Israelites, through Abraham, through Isaac, through Jacob, and etc. I can spend a whole paragraph pointing out the similarities between Christianity and Islam that are rooted in history. However, if I just point out those similarities, that isn't enough. I have to explain how those similarities prove my thesis, prove that there is a similarity in the origin. I can't just say what's similar. That would be like if this morning for school I was late because I went to Chick-fil-A. If I just said I went to Chick-fil-A this morning, you would have no idea that I was late. I have to say, literally, because I went to Chick-fil-A and the drive-through line was too long, I was late for school. That's the second point. So you have to put these things together. Don't just say what it is, explain why it fits in your essay, why it supports your thesis. So let's continue and look at our other 2 examples. Our first example of difference is that Christianity and Islam are mostly different in how they spread. Christianity tended to be a little bit more peaceful through intentional missionaries. I could give examples throughout my essay like Paul or Peter. Whereas Islam is typically a little bit more violent because of the precedent set by Muhammad when he came back to Mecca and conquered the Kaaba. That would be a very clear piece of evidence that proves that Christianity and Islam are different in how they spread. And finally, my third piece of evidence is that they have different views on salvation. Christianity believes in the work of Jesus Christ, that Jesus Christ died for the sake of all sins, and because of their faith in him, people are saved. Whereas Islam, on the other hand, believes that in a ritualistic faith, that one must do what is right and good in the eyes of Allah, and Allah will judge them as good. Now, there's plenty of different pieces of information that I could use to support those claims as well, how I could tie my evidence back to my thesis. For example, in Islam, I could talk about all the different rituals that Muslims are expected to follow within the 5 pillars. Or in Christianity, I could talk about the importance of a holiday like Easter and how the death of Christ really is so important to the whole faith. So there I have 3 different body paragraphs, each with a different piece of evidence, and I can kind of add in sub-evidence that's more specific to truly support my thesis. And if I do that, I should get not 1, but 2 evidence points. Now that leads to the last section of points. Again, the analysis and the complexity point. Are you using the comparison skill to the fullest, and do you have a complex argument? For the comparison skill, the best way to do this, as I already mentioned, is to both compare and contrast. Now, I know we've already checked that box, right? I have a thesis that has an if-then, a counterpoint-point system. And I also have 3 body paragraphs, 1 that involves a comparison and 2 that involve differences. However, to drive that point even further home, I need to make sure that I have good topic sentences for each comparison and each contrast. If I do that in each of my body paragraphs, it becomes very clear that I'm using that skill. And words are very important in these topic sentences. So I need a topic sentence that introduces either my similarity or my difference. And I'll follow along with the same evidence I used earlier. So my first section should be focused on similarity, specifically how Christianity started. A good topic sentence might look like this. Christianity and Islam are both monotheistic religions that trace their origins back to the Bible. Once I have that sentence written, I can go through and I can explain the different pieces of evidence, as many facts as I can get in that paragraph to truly show why that is true, that both religions are not only monotheistic, but that they trace their roots back to the Bible. That's 1 paragraph. I clearly have a similarity. Now I need to show my differences to get that complexity point. In my next paragraph, I want to start talking about differences. And now I want to look at how Christianity and Islam differed in their spread. So a topic sentence could be like this. Conversely, Christianity and Islam differed in how they spread and diffused, as Christianity generally spread through peaceful missionaries, while Islam spread through conquest and trade. There I have a clear claim. Once again, it shows the evidence that I talked about earlier. And again, in this paragraph, I could give all sorts of facts that prove those points. I'll let you figure those out on your own. At the same time, by using a word like conversely, I showed the shift away from similarity. I'm going away from my original argument of being similar to argue that these religions are more different. By asserting that there is more difference than similarity, I have a nuanced or complex argument. And I've also used the skill all the way. I'm not just comparing, I'm also contrasting. And to hammer that home, I'm going to do that one more time in a third paragraph, now talking about the salvation views of both beliefs. Here's another topic sentence. Furthermore, Christianity and Islam differ in their beliefs of salvation. While Christianity asserts that eternal life is possible because of the death of Jesus Christ, Islam holds that salvation is found through living a life that is good in the eyes of Allah. From there on, again, I can give different pieces of historical evidence that would point to that would support that. By having a fact-rich paragraph, I have now proved yet another difference. Therefore, I have two differences, one similarity. That is a complex argument, and hopefully, assuming I craft it in a way that is not only nuanced, but higher level thinking, that sounds intelligence, that makes logical sense, I should have a great essay. So hopefully that gives you a good indication of how the comparative LEQ works. Not only the skill of comparison, but also how the rubric works. I encourage you to follow that format using the counterpoint thesis style, although X, Y, because A, B, and C. I also encourage you to try to stick to 5 paragraphs. The reason for that is you have a limited time. You only have 45 minutes. You need to write as much as you can. If you stick to 4 to 5 paragraphs, you should be able to get all those arguments and all of those points in. And in the end, remember, the wonderful thing about a free response is it's just that. It's free. While there certainly are rules you need to follow to get those rubric points, you really get to do what you want. It's open-ended, so remain creative. Pick the topics you feel comfortable with. When it comes to religions in this type of essay, pick the ones you know the most about. You know your strengths, so stick to those. And like anything else in this class, it's going to take practice. It's a skill. It's not knowledge, it's a skill. So you can get better at this. And we're starting here at the beginning. Now, of course, there's also 2 other LEQs, some SAQs, and a DBQ, but that's a story for another day. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.